look at the cervical vertebra, so here's a typical cervical vertebra. You see here's the body of the vertebra. You see quite small, right? Remember I said that these bodies of the vertebra are shaped like a pyramid, large at the bottom, small at the top. So you can see this is, this gives you like a pretty good indication of why you would want to really, let's say, use your arms a lot if you're doing a headstand, right? Because these bones are not designed to hold up the weight of the body. They're not nearly as large as the lumbar. The spinous process is oriented more or less straight back. They tend to be a little bit longer than the lumbar, but fairly slender, oriented straight back, so that they don't really interfere too much with extension or flexion. The bottommost cervical vertebra is called C7. It has a very, very prominent spinous process, very long spinous process. You can feel it at the base of the neck. It sticks out at the base of the neck. Sometimes if you've been doing shoulder stand, you might notice like a little red spot. If that bone has been pressing on the floor. Hopefully not, right? Hopefully you're holding your weight more on your shoulders rather than on your neck. Also, interestingly, if you look at these cervical vertebrae, you see how there are these little holes here in the transverse processes. And these holes line up, one on top of the other. Running through these holes are arteries, which are called the vertebral arteries. And those vertebral arteries carry blood up to the brain. It's not the only blood vessel that carries blood to the brain. There's also the carotid arteries, but they carry some amount of blood to the brain. Do you remember, did you guys read that, there's an article in the New York Times a couple years ago about the dangers of the dangers of everything in yoga, right? And one of the things that he was talking about was like the risk of stroke, right? So that's where that comes from. It's the risk of damage to this the vertebral arteries, sometimes called the beauty parlor syndrome, right? Because you go to get your hair washed, and they put you in those, that sink, and your head is going backwards. And it can cause a compression of that vertebral artery, and has been known to result in strokes. It's something to think about. We want to be a little bit careful to not kind of over compress the back of the neck. Sometimes people doing a pose like camel, for instance, and they have limited, range of motion in their thoracic spine. They can't lift the chest, and they kind of overdo too much compression in the cervical spine. So we don't want to be sort of compressing those vertebral arteries and causing potential damage there or limiting the amount of blood to the brain.
So what would be the direction that would avoid that, say, in a...
Really focusing more on creating the lift through the chest and creating the lift in the upper back.
Then placing your head back.
Yeah. I mean, your head will go back. Your head will eventually go back, but it shouldn't go back. Yes, not like that.
Without
exactly. Yeah. You don't want to be like here and then that.
What is the anatomical purpose of the spinous processes, like the extension of it?
So there are muscles that attach there, and they work to extend the spine. So there's muscles that attach to these spinous processes here, and if they pull straight down, if they pull on the spinous process downward, that's going to tend to pull the back of the spine down and would lift the front. It would extend the spine. Or other muscles attached to the spinous process and then attached to transverse processes. And if they contract, they would tend to pull the spinous process sideways, which would result in rotation of the spine.
So the processes really have to do a lot with motion.
Yes, they do. Exactly. They are the attachment points for muscles.